just like Abhishek Sharma was able to drive India to a very solid start, similarly in India's GDP, India's economy, the engine which has been able to drive, like the government has pushed so many reforms, so many changes, so that the first booster, which is the most important one, consumption, somehow picks up. Right, Gandhi? So what are the 4 major boosters that the government of India has?
So we've discussed this and we've touched upon last video as well. One is consumption, second is government spending, third is the private investment engine, and the fourth is the net of imports and exports.
Perfect. So this means import exports we are always negative. Something respectable because of our services, but goods के वजह से we are total negative.
And I think not many know कि out of these 4 things that make the pie of GDP is the highest contributor with almost 60% of contribution to the GDP.
60%, right? We have discussed this multiple times. 60% comes from consumption, and if that picks up, then the entire economy will no doubt pick up.
Perfect. And the idea of doing this is just to try and get some perspective. If consumption is not pushing the GDP growth will fall eventually or gradually.
The thing is, growth was here, growth is still happening, but the rate of growth is coming down. We need higher rate of growth. ऐसा नहीं है कि decline हो रहा है, growth हो रहा है, but the rate of growth is reducing, which is not the ideal scenario.
Correct. So we want to accelerate the growth, and simply put, क्योंकि if government has some vision for 2047, the idea is to grow at a 7.5% every year to reach the ambition which government has put for themselves. Okay. Perfect. The reason why government is pushing for consumption is simply to push the GDP growth. Our government has beautifully done it in 2 different ways. And now you can guess it. The first one was the budget announcement.
Yes. Not multiple ways, but 2 have been the headline grabbers, because ऐसा बोलते हैं ना कि sometimes it takes decades for some change to happen, and कभी-कभी कुछ दिनों के अंदर ही I think I forgot the exact quote, decades worth of progress happens in a matter of few days. In this case, a few years. This financial year itself, we saw a major cut in income tax, which impacted a vast majority of, we can say, middle class and higher category, not the lower, not the vast majority of Indians. But the second reform, which came very recently, implemented from 22nd September, Navratri, is the GST reduction on basically 90% plus items. Correct?
Correct. And now if you can try and explain ki, because of these 2 changes or modifications that government has made, how is it impacting common people like you and me?
So very simple. Firstly, like if we consider ourselves as part of the common people, basically government helped in the increment part of of a lot of people. And the second basically is because of GST reduction on several key items, like you can say the daily consumption items have come to, most of them have come to 5%. Many of them like dairy have gone to 0%, right? Dairy 0% चला गया ना? फिर lot of electronic items, TVs, large appliances, automobiles, उस पे भी there is a major reduction, तो 18% पे electronics आ गए हैं. The last few days of newspaper headlines were all about each and every organization, a category, thanking the government, thanking the Prime Minister for these reforms, and committing that the reduction in GST price will be passed on to the customer. मतलब पहले अगर something MRP was 100 rupees, which included say 10 rupees of taxation, GST वाला, if the government said कि नहीं 10 के जगह सिर्फ अभी 5 रुपए टैक्स दे दो, so the companies are saying we will make sure that the prices come down to 95 and they will not keep the profit. Basically, this will help in boosting consumption. So with the same money, but because things around have come down to lower prices, people will tend to buy more.
Beautifully. And 2 important points. One is this is definitely impacting our inflation as well, and which 100%. Is why the inflation numbers are expected to be and maybe to remain lower.
Correct. In fact, some of the reports that we read was that inflation had reached a very low point, almost 1.55% in July. August may touch 2%. It was coming धीरे धीरे ऊपर, but because of this reduction, there will be definitely 1% का overall inflation में कमी, because everything around has come down by a decent proportion. वो अच्छी बात है. महंगाई is going to already कम थी. Government was able to figure it out. एंड अभी और लॉन्गर टर्म में गवर्नमेंट, आरबीआई, ऑल द रेलेवेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स कुछ और टाइम तक महंगाई कम रहेगी, which is very nice.
It was that in the budget, by reducing our income tax, the government was trying to say कि the 20% people, let's say, who are salaried and who are paying taxes will be benefiting. GST में the scale of benefit is a lot more higher.
Correct.
Because every person gets benefited.
100%.
With the GST reform.
With GST reforms, there will not be a single person who will not be impacted. Income tax वाला only those who had a salary more than 7 lakhs or so were benefited. बाकी लोगों के लिए it was more or less the same as compared to last year or last couple of years. So yes, you are absolutely right in mentioning GST reform, and we will see the numbers in the days ahead. Already day one की headline आ गई थी कि Maruti, Hyundai, all these companies had blockbuster, like all time highest sales interest and records on day one. Monday को ही 11,000 20,000 वैसे ऑर्डर बुक आ रही थी, which is a very positive number. Obviously festive season भी है, plus GST reduction, and people had delayed their purchase, जिसके वजह से it all accumulated. But we will see over the course of next few months, ट्रम्प भाई की वजह से जो हुआ है, गवर्नमेंट इज लाइक फेसिंग इट फुल फ्लेज कि नहीं, वी विल फिगर आउट अ वे टू tackle this kind of a external threat.
Absolutely. And let me put it this way, that government has beautifully timed both these reforms. And why I say it, because like we explained, there are 4 drivers of GDP. Usme se, if you think about it, government is spending a lot. In last 4-5 years, the capex, if you see, has increased significantly higher.
Right.
There is a room to push it more. Okay? That is one. So upside wahan se nahi aane wala. So you also see that the private investments that the corporates do, the government is pushing them a lot in investing in India, because even they are not at their peak. The peak was in 2015-16, where they touched the peak, and now they've again mellowed down. Now the balance sheets and everything are robust, but the government is pushing it. It's just that the environment is not very suitable for them. It's volatile.
You are absolutely right, Gandhi bhai. In fact, I read it today in the newspaper that one of the benefits out of this is that the corporates have been able to clean their balance sheet. They are able to, because they are generating cash, they are growing, and because they are not putting the money back in some investments, they have been able to pay off their debt. तो वी विल डिस्कस कभी कि वो जो इंडिया का ट्विन बैलेंस शीट डेट का जो मेजर प्रॉब्लम हो गया था फॉर कॉर्पोरेट्स, फॉर बैंक्स, दैट वाज अ मेजर इशू व्हाई इंडिया वाज लैगिंग. इंडिया वाज पार्ट ऑफ द फ्रेजाइल 5. बट नाउ कॉर्पोरेट्स हैव मनी, दे हैव लोअर डेट्स, and inflation is less, consumption is picking up. So people, so friends, you can imagine that in the next few years or immediately, the companies will start investing. They are raising capital. Another indicator is, you can say, the IPOs, which were a boom 2-3 years back. Like every IPO people were applying and uska listing gain करके तुरंत बेच रहे थे. And then you saw a very lull period. And now you can see the likes of Urban Company. Then अभी पढ़ रहे हैं तो PhonePe applied for an IPO, Lenskart, all the companies which are very much, we see around us a lot, like especially people like us use them a lot. Obviously there are very good companies in manufacturing, something in the defense sector, something in और आज किसका देखा ना, आनंद राठी वेल्थ, उनका IPO आ रहा है. So you can see the fact that companies are confident about the market situation, that they will get a decent valuation. So that is also a positive indicator कि गवर्नमेंट ने पूरा खर्चा कर लिया, capex was done, consumption का boost मिल गया, but government कहीं ना कहीं will have to come down and private expenditure will have to come up. जिसका डायरेक्ट कोरिलेशन, गांधी भाई कैन यू हेल्प एक्सप्लेन, कि गवर्नमेंट खर्चा कम करेगी तो इम्पैक्ट आएगा फिस्कल डेफिसिट के ऊपर, बिकॉज कंजम्पशन में भी टैक्सेशन का भी कोई इम्पैक्ट होता है इन टर्म्स ऑफ फिस्कल डेफिसिट, राइट?
परफेक्टली. तो व्हाट वी आर सीइंग इज द ब्राइटर साइड. यहाँ पे अगर फॉर अ इंडिविजुअल डिस्पोजेबल इनकम, जो पैसा हमें मिल रहा है हमारे हाथों में, इफ दैट अमाउंट ऑफ मनी इंक्रीजेस, व्हिच मींस कि जब भी गवर्नमेंट टैक्स कम कर रहा है, डायरेक्ट और इनडायरेक्ट, उनके पास उनके किटी में, उनके रेवेन्यू में वो ड्रॉप दिखेगा. व्हिच मींस दैट गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग विल हैव टू बी मॉडरेटेड, बिकॉज़ उतना पैसा नहीं होगा उनके पास टू स्पेंड फर्दर.
मतलब पैसा होगा बट उनको अपना फिस्कल डेफिसिट कम करना है. फिस्कल डेफिसिट इज बेसिकली गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग माइनस रेवेन्यू, व्हिच इज करंटली टारगेटेड टू रीच 4.4% ऑफ द जीडीपी. लास्ट फाइनेंशियल ईयर में FY25 में 4.8% था, तो हमको 40 बेसिस पॉइंट्स से कम करना है, एंड हम लोग ने रेवेन्यू कम कर दिया गवर्नमेंट ने.
तो द ओनली होप इज दैट बिकॉज देयर विल बी अ राइज इन डिमांड, व्हिच इज राइज इन वॉल्यूम, सो टू से. तो जो मेरा प्राइसिंग हमने कम किया है, सिंपल लॉजिक है, प्राइस इनटू माय डिमांड वॉल्यूम विल गिव मी द रेवेन्यू. माय प्राइस हैज ड्रॉप्ड, the expectation is the volume will increase significantly, so that मेरा absolute जो होगा multiplier will more or less remain the same. More importantly, think about it कि अगर हम import ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं और export कम हो रहा है हमारा, which means मेरा demand for US dollar is more and for rupee is less, which means मेरा rupee will weaken against the dollar. Simple भाषा में जो पहले एक USD was 80 rupees, अभी वो 1 USD will become 90 rupees. Now what the worst impact of this is, जब भी मैं oil, crude oil या ऐसे कुछ खरीद रहा हूँ, वहाँ पे I'm paying in dollars. For the same amount of $100, let's say that I'm paying, now I am giving away a lot more Indian rupees because of that, because मेरा exchange rate गिर गया. So that is something which needs to be taken care of. And let me try and summarize this. So while the good part is that the government has increased consumption, both by GST reforms as well as my indirect tax cut, income tax में cut ला लिया है वहाँ पे. Both these are good boosters for consumption.
Right.
This was a lot more needed at this point of time, because my other three drivers, one being the private investment, needs to pick up, and government is trying a lot to ensure that it picks up. एक वो FDI जो फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट है बाहर की कंपनी से, उन लोग को अर्ज करे कि आप यहाँ पे आओ, यहाँ पे जॉइंट वेंचर्स बनाओ हमारी कंपनी के साथ और कुछ मैन्युफैक्चर करो. दैट इज वन. सेकंड, अगर आप देखोगे तो हमारा जो रेट कट है आरबीआई का, दैट इज नाउ द रेट्स आर रिड्यूसिंग, व्हिच मींस पहले जो अभी 6.5 था एट इट्स पीक, 5.5 हुआ, नाउ 5.25. सो द आइडिया इज मेरा कॉस्ट ऑफ फंड्स फॉर द कंपनी इज ड्रॉपिंग. मतलब प्रॉफिट्स बढ़ेगा प्लस द कंफर्मेशन ऑफ डिमांड, because consumption बढ़ रहा है, so they have visibility of demand as well. For now that they have both these, the idea is that अभी तो आप expand करो and put the private investments in place. So that is the first driver which the government is pushing very hard. There is constraint on the government spending that we explained already, right. The capex. बहुत ज़्यादा push नहीं कर सकते हैं. And third, because of the volatility around US tariffs etc., we cannot be banking on exports or the net of exports minus imports, जो अभी हमारे लिए नेगेटिव है. lot more points to think of, because चाइना के लिए भी the tariffs are there, तो चाइना का जो भी surplus production है is coming to India at a much cheaper rates as compared to the domestic production.
Right.
So which is why that's a threat to private investments. Because imagine करो यहाँ पे मैं स्टील बना रहा हूँ 100 रुपए में और मैं इंपोर्ट करके चाइना से लेके आ रहा हूँ 80 रुपीज में स्टील. My automobile company will prefer a 80 rupees steel as compared to 100 rupees steel domestically produced.
Correct, क्योंकि चाइना स्टील ही इतना ज़्यादा बनाता है. चाइना सब कुछ ज़्यादा ही. चाइना के साथ इफ़ यू वांट टू कंपेयर ऑन एनी मेट्रिक, यू नीड टू क्रिएट अ लॉगरिथमिक स्केल. नॉर्मल स्केल में चाइना ऐसा स्क्रीन के ऊपर चला जाएगा, इंडिया इधर किधर होगा, बाकी सब कंट्रीज होंगे. वी आर एट अ रिस्पेक्टेबल नंबर, टॉप 5 टॉप 3 में होते हैं हम लोग, बट चाइना अलग ही लेवल पे होता है. एंड देन इट डंप्स इट्स प्रोडक्ट्स. इनफैक्ट वही था वन पॉइंट विच आई रेड वंस अगेन वाज कि चाइना हैज़ बीन एबल टू सस्टेन इट्स एक्सपोर्ट्स. इट हैज़ बीन शार्प वेरी स्मार्टली बीन एबल टू डाइवर्ट यूएस की जगह पे लैटिन अमेरिका, अफ्रीका, यूरोप में अपने प्रोडक्ट्स, और उसका एक्सपोर्ट जो उसका चाइना का मेजर बूस्ट इज एक्सपोर्ट. कंजम्पशन तो है ही उनका, दे आर अ वेरी बिग इकोनॉमी एंड मच मच रिचर, ऑलमोस्ट 3-4 टाइम्स रिचर देन इंडिया. वो तो करते ही हैं, प्लस वो इतना एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं. गवर्नमेंट भी खर्चा करती है उनका, दे बिल्ड लाइक क्रेजी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. तो यू कैन इमेजिन फॉर कंट्री लाइक चाइना, जिनका GDP इज ऑलमोस्ट 5 टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया, 20 ट्रिलियन 4 ट्रिलियन, एंड दे आर ऑल्सो फायरिंग ऑल सिलेंडर्स. दे आर फिगरिंग आउट वेज टू डू इट. So we are much smaller and we have high aspirations, so we also have to do it somehow.
A fun fact, because you mentioned about China and China's consumption. So in the last 2 decades, China ka consumption, which is a percentage of its GDP, which was earlier around 45%, has now dropped to almost less than 20%.
Wow.
But imagine करो उनका GDP इतना ज़्यादा grow हुआ है. In absolute terms, it will still be higher.
Absolutely higher होगा, correct.
Yeah, correct.
But उन्होंने exports मतलब कितना ज़्यादा push करके दिखाया है. Everywhere. That is a major learning for us. So friends, in summary, what we can say is that we've been able to link so many different topics: taxation, GST, income tax, GST, उसका current account deficit, trade wars, fiscal deficit, and what's happening. Like, we are trying to link so many dots because the thought is it impacts each one of you. Next time we read any GST, any GDP growth numbers, a 6%, a 7% is not just a number from an RBI or a finance का ministry का KPI. It impacts your wallet, it impacts my wallet, it impacts the prices at which we buy things, the level of luxury or the level of, we can say, comfort that all Indian citizens are able to enjoy. तो like try to think from those perspective कि ये लग रहा है हमको कि उसमें हमारा क्या लेना देना, अपन तो अपना देख लेंगे.
GDP में जो 4 इंजन है, it imagine it to be like a sprint, right? तो एक ही जन कब तक भागेगा.
कब तक
So right
भागेगा.
now it's consumption,
Correct.
which is running the race. Now the other three drivers need to pick up the pace.
डेफिनेटली भाई, यू बहुत मस्त एग्जांपल दिया गांधी भाई कि पहला लैप हो गया है गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग, दूसरा लैप गवर्नमेंट जो मेजर लैप है सबसे फास्टेस्ट यूसेन बोल्ट टाइप का रनर हमारा वो कंजम्पशन है, उसके लिए भी गवर्नमेंट बहुत कुछ कर रही है. बट अभी इट्स टाइम फॉर प्राइवेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. तो इफ एनी वन ऑफ यू इज एंटरप्रेन्योर, करो इन्वेस्ट भाई, बी बैंक ऑन द कंजम्पशन मूव. इफ यू आर डूइंग एनीथिंग, कुछ भी बनाते हो, any service, any product you're making, go for it because there is demand, a lot of demand. People have money. If you are making goods, making services of excellent quality, then definitely you will be able to make a lot out of it. And that is what the government is trying. That is what is our understanding, and this is going to be the trend for the foreseeable future. We'll try to link the dots once again, and I think the most relevant part which we think can come is about the trade numbers. Like India is doing a lot in trade. We always try to negate कि हैं हमारे ट्रेड कुछ नहीं होता है ऐसा वैसा, बट ट्रेड पे भी देर आर गुड नंबर्स एंड वी आर इन्वेस्टिंग. आई थिंक इन द फोर्सिबल फ्यूचर मेरा एक हंच है, वी विल बी वेरी सून नेट ट्रेड पॉजिटिव, ऐसा मेरे को अंदर से फीलिंग आ रही है विद इन 2-3 years. आई डोंट नो, सर्विसेज एंड गुड्स मिला के वी थिंक वी विल बी पॉजिटिव, ऐसा लग रहा है. लेट्स होप हमारे सर्विसेज अच्छे से क्लिक करें.
And this is what more interesting is that September is the month जहाँ पे US tariffs जो 50% है, it's the whole full month जहाँ पे this is going to impact India as an economy. इसका जो trade deficit numbers आएगा whenever it comes, it will be very interesting to deep dive and understand कि what has India done to protect or cushion itself from this.
Yes, देख चाइना जैसा हम लोग बोले कि चाइना has been able to figure out different areas जहाँ पे अपना export कर रहा है. India is also doing a lot of deals, free trade agreement, comprehensive economic partnership, ये सब कुछ ना कुछ हो जाएगा. Okay.